Is what it is.
Hostile fleet.
Taken any tests since then, or?
Have I taken any IQ tests since then?
Yeah, or you just...
Honestly, I'm afraid to, because I've taken them before. I know what's required in terms of, like, timed tasks. I know for sure I couldn't do those things well. Like, I've done enough of them, like, both in formal testing environments and just, like, online ones.
What did you take a formal IQ test for, anyway?
Because my dad, who was an asshole and abusive, tried to claim, like, that, oh, you know, maybe he's, like, not normal somehow in the brain, so he could discredit my testimony about this stuff. And that horribly backfired when it turned out I was, like, very high in the genius range. And, you know, my, of course, stifled social skills because of the weird abusive upbringing I had at the time. You know, you see strange behaviors from kids who suffer pretty bad abuse. Like, I wouldn't look people in the eye, and he tried to claim that meant I was autistic. No, I wouldn't look people in the eye because he would get, like, violently angry if people looked back at him when he was, like, lording over them, you know. He was one of those people who would get up in your face and stare at you if you looked at them. You know? Some people are like that. They're like a gorilla male, where if you look at it in the eye, it'll rip your arms off. So I learned not to look people in the face because of that as a kid, and he tried to... So it wasn't actually supposed to be about IQ, it was testing for other stuff, but it, as a side effect, it not only showed that a lot of the stuff he's saying was bullshit, but, like, it also showed that my IQ was through the roof. And then follow-up testing to confirm this showed. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
And there we go. Science ship. I mean, science ship, combat ship. Another MA. I've now run across...
I've never taken an actual IQ test before.
Oh, well, they have ones online, they're not great, and they... But the real way to do it is to have, like, formalized testing by people who actually, like, you know, do this. Experts, testing centers. It's... Honestly... doesn't mean as much as people think, because it only really tests certain intelligences. The more advanced theories of intelligence have, like, you know, it specifically tends to favor like mathematical, verbal, and spatial intelligences. Spatial not necessarily being the same thing, because you can have people who are really good at art but are terrible at math. Although geometry is obviously a spatial mathematics, and it doesn't say really do enough to look at certain other types of intelligence, like bodily kinesthetic, interpersonal, intrapersonal.
Yeah, I've heard it's a fairly flawed system.
IQ, honestly, is very wrapped up in, like, eugenics and some really nasty parts of, like, British imperialism. So,
yeah,
it's a terrible measure.
It's got a bad rap.
For good reason. So. But I suppose the concept of genius is not an invalid thing. Some people are able to pick up new knowledge incredibly quickly. However, it has led to this idea that you have to be smart to do really challenging things. Honestly, with, you know, I'd probably rather have, in some cases, like, say, a physician who spent more years in medical school but was really hardworking, dedicated, and had a really great memory, than someone who learned new stuff really quickly. Especially if it was like in a field that didn't require a lot of on-your-feet problem solving. It was more, you know, because some types of specialties you need to figure out difficult problems. You can have people who specialize in difficult diagnoses, and others are like primary care providers who just need to do the same thing over and over and need to have really good attention to detail so they can find if something doesn't add up, because not everything is the most common possible cause. Like, doctors get anchored to, like, really obvious explanations, and then they like don't treat zebras. When you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras. It's the same, but zebras do occur. Like, I've had this cough since I was at least 20. It's clearly not due to any of the common causes, but every time I see a doctor, they keep, oh, let's test acid reflux, let's test this. They test like the same 3 things every time. It's like, this has been ruled out 6 times before. Of course, the reason they do that is really because insurance demands it. And then they'll like, okay, they ruled these things out, then they'll just kind of like lose interest and they won't even bother, because my insurance isn't always great, especially with like Medicaid. They won't bother to like, I need specialist testing to figure out what's actually going on. Right before the pandemic hit, I had decent student health insurance, and I finally got a doctor who cared enough to like get me to a specialist, and then the specialist to follow up, and they were going to do all these testing, and then COVID hit, and they canceled all non-essential appointments. And all my pulmonary stuff that was going to figure out what was causing my cough was canceled. And then, you know, they were busy with the pandemic until I got long COVID, and then I was on Medicaid because, you know, I wasn't able to continue grad school anymore, and then I no longer have insurance that will reimburse the hospital what it even costs to do the tests, you know? Like, so they pay the hospital.
You had a cough before long COVID?
Oh, I've had a cough since at least the age of 20, and I had sporadically some coughs as a child. It's not known, although one of the possible there's like several possible explanations, and they're all kind of scary because they're like either weird autoimmune diseases or genetic, like enzymatic stuff. There's a mild form of cystic fibrosis or a benign tumor that's pushing on a nerve or the back of my throat, or malformation of the back of my throat is the most benign possible explanation. But it's definitely not just like acid reflux, which is what they keep working up. Or allergies. That was acid reflux and allergies. The thing that and one other thing. Oh yeah, or maybe it's asthma. I've actually had many tests that show I don't have asthma. So it's like, stop working me up for acid reflux, asthma, and allergies every time. It's not those things that cause the cough. Like, I don't need an inhaler that half the time the insurance won't even cover, and then the pharmacy won't even provide it, unless, you know, I don't need an inhaler, an acid reflux med, and an allergy med all at the same time. And they'd be like, oh, well, if you try them all together, it's like, yes, with this other doctor. Well, you haven't done with me. It's like, they just want an excuse to put this off until I get sick of trying to, or they do go through with what they say, and then they just make sure they're not available for making another appointment. Like, they'll direct their secretary to put me off because they don't want to spend the money of doing more advanced testing, because Medicaid pays them very, very low rates. Often they lose money treating Medicaid patients because the United States sucks and doesn't fund healthcare well, because we're the evil empire. We are the bad guys. We are the Empire from Star Wars. It's not even, I mean, that's literally George Lucas said that he was inspired by the United States when he created the Empire. And Nazi Germany also, but the United States. He even said that the Vietnam War was one of his inspirations, with the US being the bad guys, you know, in the Vietnam War, in his opinion.
Yeah, I saw him say that in an interview.
That was particularly egregious in episode 3, you know, or episode 6 with the Return of the Jedi. But even in episodes 4 and 5, A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, he was already eyeing as like, this is the United States, you know. The Tatooine, especially if you know some of the scenes that cut out of A New Hope, there's a scene where Luke is talking about like joining the Imperial Navy with his friends in Tatooine, and it's very reminiscent of like farm boys in like the American Midwest, something about like talking about like joining the army to get out of these nowhere backwater farm towns, right? Like that was an intentional parallel, like, so, you know, the Empire originally, the way the script was apparently written, didn't have the Empire is immediately become obviously evil, and like you learned about it as the story went on, and then they just went, no, we'll just have Luke's, you know, uncle and aunt get murdered, like, I mean, very early on, there was supposed to be a lot more stuff that happened on Tatooine, and that was cut, because it was originally a story told as kids, like there were many versions of the script before he settled on the one that was actually used. I saw one of the really early versions once, and it didn't even resemble the Star Wars that we saw.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it wasn't even. I don't even think Tatooine was even a desert planet originally, if I remember. It was a long time ago. I read a little bit of this.
Huh.
I mean, I think the final product has a lot to recommend it, and I love Star Wars, but it's just amazing how much goes right over people's heads when they watch that, and they don't realize it's about us. It's about empire. It's about the British. It's about the Americans. It's about every empire in history. The empire is kind of a, you know, it's a distilled of all the evil of every empire that has ever existed. It's kind of cultural mashup, but it was written with increasingly, especially as the Vietnam War was ongoing, the crimes of the U.S. in mind, but also with echoes to like the Nazis. So yeah, the stormtroopers are inspired by the Nazi stormtroopers. Obviously, that shouldn't even be, but that doesn't mean that just because they are, that it's not a reference to any other empire that ever existed either. So
Yeah.
System survey.
They definitely take a lot of visual cues from the Nazis.
and they take auditory cues from the British Empire. All the imperial officers, the high officers, you know, like the high admiralty, they all have British accents, which is a cue, akin to be a cue in movies. If you want someone to be a bad guy imperialist, give them a British accent.
Yeah.
Because the British were literally an empire that coated like half the earth, and they somehow whitewashed a lot of their crimes out of the popular imagination now, but they like went around and like starved people to death in countries and stuff.
Oh yeah.
And
Especially,
gassed
yeah.
villages, and I think and burned villages to the ground and shot civilians. Like, people have forgotten about what the British did to build and maintain their empire. Instead, they become, oh, they were an empire that ruled with a light hand. No, they didn't. Just because you set low taxes and the rich doesn't mean you ruled with a light hand. The level of military oppression was fierce under the British. There's a reason, like, yes, America's founding fathers of slave owners wanted to keep their slaves, but there was some truth to the idea that the British troops were like brutal tyrants. It's not entirely propaganda. So, that's the thing. People always polarize themselves. They have trouble accepting that both sides of a story sometimes have some validity. So like this Tad Sturmer guy would probably completely throw out the window everything that was said about the British being like, he'd say it was more about like slavery and taxes, but in those things were a huge part of the American Revolution, but there was some truth to the British army. Of course, that's not why the founding fathers challenged them, but it is something that was a reason to resent them, even if it wasn't why they were challenged. Because, you know, ultimately, the reason they were challenged was more about money and taxes and these kind of well-understood things. But it was why some of the ordinary colonists got behind. It's why the Boston Massacre was something that people could believe was a massacre, even though it was kind of set up, you know?
What do you mean? It was set up?
Partially, yeah. They had a guy in who wore the coat of one of the founding fathers. They knew the British were trying to track down and kill, who was there to try and encourage the British to shoot because they thought they might kill this guy. They organized violence against the British soldiers. Like, they had the whole thing planned. They were trying to provoke the British into a brutal display of an excess of force in order to galvanize the colonists against them.
Oh.
So, but they were only able to do this because they knew the British were the bad guys. They couldn't have done this if the British weren't brutal authoritarians. Just like, I'm sure if America starts to say into civil war, people will tempt, like, you know, some of these ICE assholes or maybe even a National Guardian into like a brutal overuse of force against civilians in order to galvanize opposition. That's a classic resistance tactic. Is to, like, if you know somebody is evil and doesn't care about civilian life, make them show it in a way that will ruin their popularity with the masses. So,
Yeah.
that's Resistance 101, basically. Anyways.
Makes sense.
I really can't play that quite today. I'm just so tired. Let's see. Okay, I've done a hyperlubrication thing. 80 minutes in. I'll probably have to do a lot of video editing to cut this into manageable chunks. You want to cut it here so I can take a rest and we'll play some other time? Is that cool? I'm sorry, I'm crashing so hard today.
If you're feeling tired, that's alright.
Beyond tired. I'm pushing through unbelievable exhaustion just because I have to produce. If my YouTube channel doesn't make it, I don't know, I'm gonna keep a roof over my head, especially if these social security pricks deny. Even if they give me this SSI, it's not enough to pay rent in a lot of areas. I need to supplement it with YouTube ad money eventually. In fact, I don't think they even start paying out until my savings are under $2,000. And then when they do, it's like, you know, it won't be enough to cover rent, so...
Yeah. Jeez.
Yeah, some parts of the country, though, it is enough to pay rent, just not where I am, so may have to move to somewhere where it's cheaper. Okay, anyways. Oh shoot, I didn't cut the video. Well, folks on YouTube, I wish you all the best. Take care of each other. Be kind to yourselves, and may you always find a guiding star to lead on. Till next time, this is Northstar, and Joe. Adieu.